Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World, and tonight I'm joined by former Labour advisor Stella Sadikidou, and I've got the brilliant Theo Usherwood, who's a former political editor at LBC. We're going to get straight to it, guys, tonight. The Labour Party have come out the traps really quick on the immigration crisis, the asylum process. Labour said they're going to sort this out. They started by making an announcement over the Bibby Stockholm. They're going to close that down. They're going to fast-track asylum claims. Theo, is this going to work?
It remains to be seen whether it's going to work. Look, what they're trying to do is two things, Lee. They're trying to take the heat out of the situation. So they're closing down the Bibby Stockholm. It was, of course, subject to a number of challenges. There were huge problems with it in terms of Legionnaire's disease and, of course, fire safety on board the Bibby Stockholm.
Yep.
So Labour, the government wants to take the heat out of the immigration debate. And also, I'd point you to, you'd have seen some of those Home Office memes, cards on the internet where they talked about irregular migration rather than illegal migration. They're trying to dampen down.
What's the difference?
Well, I think the word illegal is seen to be more contentious. I think it's seen to be more inflammatory. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to dampen down the debate, so it's not immigration isn't such a hot topic, and then get to the business of trying to sort it out. Of course, they've shut down the Rwanda scheme, and they're also planning to overturn a clause in Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman's Migration Act, which basically Lee had the effect of meaning that if you came to this country by a small boat, you would have no right to claim asylum in this country. And the argument that Yvette Cooper was making in the House of Commons was that this had created a huge backlog of 100 to 120,000 people just stuck in the system, and that in a perverse way it acted as an incentive, because the smuggler gangs were able to say to those charging £2,500 a time to cross the channel, you can come to the country and you're just going to be stuck in this system because they're not going to process you. Now, the figure that I found extraordinary to come out of the House of Commons was that there's a projection, this came from Yvette Cooper, that within 4 years' time, the whole asylum system would cost the government, cost the taxpayer, you and me, your constituents, Lee, 30 to 40 billion pounds.
Wow.
Because it's more and more people are going into the system and not coming out of the system. So their solution is to take out that clause, but that then gives the right to anybody who arrives by small boat to claim asylum in this country. And the Refugees Council's own numbers put the success rate for those claims at around 62%. Yeah. So that means that around 70,000 people in that backlog are going to have successful claims to stay in this country.
Not a good start, Stella, for the Labour Party, is it? This, like Theo's just said, 60 to 70,000 of the people already in the system are pretty much guaranteed to get their asylum claim passed and stay in this country.
What are you comparing these figures to say that this is a bad start? I think this is an excellent start. This is exactly what they needed to be doing within their first 100 days. The numbers that you are suggesting are not bad for a country the size of the UK. Let me remind you, I come from Greece. We have a lot more than those arriving on our shores. And just because the UK, the previous government, wanted to do something illegal, basically, and stop accepting refugees completely, doesn't mean that the problem of refugees stops being the case in the current international context, right? So I would say it's a very good start. And as Theo said, it's very important that the backlog is dealt
Stella,
with.
can I just ask you a question, please?
Yeah.
You talk about refugees. Do you think these people coming over the English Channel, who we sometimes bill as being trafficked by the evil gangs, are they genuine refugees that fleeing a war-torn country and persecution? Because the last time I looked, it's pretty peaceful in France, apart from sometimes in Paris when it kicks off.
As you just said, it's just 62% that get accepted. So the rest of them don't get accepted, they get denied asylum. Now, I'm sure you would agree that if someone has family in the UK and if they speak English, that is a very good reason why they would want to come to the UK and stay here, right?
No, I don't agree with that.
You don't agree that a refugee who already has family members here would be much more able to assimilate?
I thought the idea of fleeing persecution in a war-torn country was to go and be safe, not worry about whether or not they speak the English.
Do you think the refugees during the World War II, do you not think that they wanted to come to the US because they had family?
Well, I know families of refugees from the Second World War. I used to work with many sons and grandsons of the Eastern European refugees down the pits when I worked down the coal mines. And let me tell you, when their grandparents came from places like Latvia at the end of the war. These were displaced people, by the way, who'd been forced to fight for the Germans. They then had to come back because they didn't go back to their villages. They could not speak a word of English. They came here, they learnt the language, they assimilated, and they made good lives for themselves. But they genuinely feared for their lives.
I think there will be a lot of refugees who genuinely feared for their lives as well. Look, I accept your point. There are a lot of people who want to come here as economic migrants. Yeah. I take that. This does not make them bad people. I understand that you want to live in a world where immigration is not a thing.
So they are economic migrants then?
There are some economic migrants there, for sure, 100%. And a lot of them are going to get their applications denied.
Yes, but
a lot of them will get deported back to wherever they came from.
So where do we send? Yvette Cooper's been asked time and time again. If you get an illegal come over the channel, they turn out to be from Afghanistan, where we don't have a returns agreement with, and they get their asylum claim rejected. Where's the Labour Party going to send them to?
Yeah, if they come from Afghanistan, there is a very good chance that they are genuine refugees, though. You understand?
No, but what if they're not?
Then you will need to have an agreement with the rest of the European countries, because if that person doesn't have any good claim, then they should go back to the country that they initially came from, so that they initially entered through. Sorry, this is why you need to have an agreement with the rest of the European countries. However, you are still talking to me about a tiny number of people. So I am wondering why, with all of the massive problems that the UK has right now, do we need to worry about a handful of people at the same time when we are in need of workers for jobs such as construction workers.
Listen, Stella, this is not a handful of people. I'm going to come back to Theo because he needs to have his say. This is not, when you've lived and worked here all your life, as I have, as my parents and my grandparents, and you've paid into the system, and you have made this country into the great country it is, the last thing you want is people coming over here taking advantage of not just our asylum system, our legal system, our housing, our benefits, our healthcare. This is what winds people up in this country.
I understand.
Theo, I'll come back to you.
So if you are granted refugee status, having gone through the asylum seeking, it is at that point you have the right to work and you have the right to claim benefits.
Yeah.
And and this is recognised in the Labour Party, by the way. I don't think this is a particularly contentious issue. Is that if Labour finds itself at the next election in 5 years' time, and we know that as well as taking a significant chunk out of the Tory vote, there were also signs that Reform UK was taking large chunks, particularly in the northeast, out of the Labour vote as well. Yeah. And it's recognised, I think, in number 10, we've heard people like Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, allude to it as well, that if this problem becomes so big and it continues to be a problem, then that is only going to add succour to people like your leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, and of course, Richard Tice. So I think there's a recognition that this needs to be dealt with. Now, the problem, which I think can be predicted, is that if you are giving, let's call it 62%, which is what the Refugee Council is saying. Yeah. The problem is that if you say to the gangs, right, they recognise, they know the system as well as anybody, we would imagine. That's why they're able to take advantage of it and operate so effectively. And of course, they need to be smashed, as Keir Starmer says. Nobody denies that. But if they're able to say to somebody, right, £2,500, and I'm going to give you a 6 in 10 chance that when you get to the UK, you're going to be able to say, I would predict that's quite a good sell from their point of view. 6 in 10. You're going to be able to stay in the UK.
The good news is, Theo, if you do get rejected, you can just go missing.
Well, yeah, that's a huge problem with detention, and that was always a problem. And I remember speaking to people within the Border Force about this, senior people in the Border Force, and that was always a problem with the Rwanda scheme. The premise of the Rwanda scheme, because the Home Office would write a letter, and this was the argument. If I write you a letter and I say, "Dear Lee, in 10 days' time, I'm going to turn up at your hotel and I'm going to deport you to Rwanda," what are you going to do?
Clear off.
Precisely. Yeah. And they didn't have, they weren't, the Tories, and this is just because of the system, they weren't able to back it up with detention centres.
Got about 30 seconds left. I can see Stella's chomping at the bit here. Come on, Stella, come back at me.
So I agree this is a big problem, and Labour is aware of that. That's why Labour is going to smash the gangs.
What does that mean?
But for less than 2%, the Rwanda scheme, for the amazing price of 7.7 billion.
We're not talking about the Rwanda scheme.
Over the next
about what
years,
is Labour going to solve this crisis?
It was going to deal with less than 2% of asylum seekers. There is such a thing as a problem that is too difficult to deal with completely. The problem is that governments, to appease voters and to appease people from the Reform Party, the previous government, the Conservative Party, because they were just thinking about their electoral success, spent all of their times completely neglecting all of the other massive problems this country has.
Oh, there you go. That's a great discussion. Thanks, Stella.